People always say, what is the best diet? Can I follow a long-term low-carb diet? And interestingly, carbohydrates, we naturally feed ourselves or create glucose energy for our bodies. And so there really isn't a set amount of glucose or
No,
carbohydrate that I tell people to follow. It's really what is sustainable and what is
right.
something that they can stick to and learn the strategies on how to manage their diabetes. And, so I know it's a hot topic for kids to maybe, or for some families who are following a low carb diet for their young children, there is a healthy amount of carbohydrates that kids need just to get their macros, to get their fiber, to get all of the phytochemicals and all of the other nutrients that food provides us. But I don't think there's a limit. And I don't know if that's how you speak to families as well, is that there's not a certain limit of carbohydrates that kids have to have.
Correct.
Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, where our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in this program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Please discuss any changes to your treatment plan with your personal healthcare provider before implementing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. I'm here with a favorite person of mine to talk to, Dana, and we are all excited to talk a little bit, I think more intro, right? Today, Dana?
Yeah.
Like low carb diets. We talk about low carb diets in a very like umbrella sort of way, but I think our dive into it, and we'll talk again, I think we'll have a longer episode about it, but really does depend person to person and like even age groups and what you're hoping to get out of said low carb diet, right?
Right. And I think in the context of living with type 1 diabetes, low carb diet means something different to everybody. And you might say, I follow a low carb diet, and I might say, I follow a low carb diet, and we may be doing two totally different things.
Correct. And that's one of the things, and you probably do the same thing when I get a chance to talk to somebody who is interested or has been sort of not even dipping their toes, but really sort of like diving into doing more low carb. And then my question is always, well, what low carb plan are you following?
Or what does that mean to you? Because if someone says I'm keto, they may very well not have the keto definition that I'm thinking about. And so we always have to start with that definition. So how do you define a low carb diet? What does that mean to you, Jenny?
In general, again, same thing. Low carb is definitely different than keto. And that's a base explanation that I give to people. Keto being truly defined as, in general, about 30 grams of carb or less per day, with the great total of calories in the diet, about 80% of the calories truly coming from fat. So you are
really having to focus on that high fat intake.
Correct. Really, keto is a fat adapted body. Your body has transitioned to using fat for its energy burn. It's a very slow, sort of satisfying burn, I guess.
Right.
I would say.
Having that satiety is very key, and you have that high fat intake, and so that comes pretty readily.
Yeah. And then low carb, generally, I find a lot more people are tending to be low carb, but not really keto low carb, right? And low carb, usually I find people somewhere between about 60 and 100 grams of carb are low carb. And then I think that even takes another little kind of tunnel off into low carb, low glycemic, right?
Right.
You might be doing low carb, and all of your carbs, despite them adding up to 70 grams a day, they might be all from vegetables.
Right. And so low carb, high fiber with, is kind of that, I think kind of the Goldilocks range, right? Just everything kind of fits. But I think that if you use those definitions, it works well across the spectrum. But most Americans who don't have diabetes don't ever think about their carbohydrates, just kind of living the dream. They eat well over 150 grams of carbs per day. And so then I think if you start to focus on a lower carb diet, it just means that you're not, really kind of having a huge high carb diet, right?
Correct. And or you're choosing, I find that a lot of people end up choosing their carbohydrates more consciously, right? It's not a quick grab of something, but they're there's a lot less processed carbohydrate in
Right.
what they are eating, because they're thinking through, well, the impact of this, especially with the population of diabetes in consideration, what would this do to my blood sugar? And
Right.
is it a long
And that's
term?
kind of what I was thinking too, is that a low carb diet sometimes also is by definition a lower processed food diet.
By definition, it could
Yeah.
be. And that's another where I ask a lot of questions, because you could be low carb, keto low carb, and you could be eating a fair amount of processed foods, because as we all have seen the boom of ketogenic products on the market, they are very processed foods. They may not hit your blood sugar in terms of, a spike, but they are not a small amount of ingredients on the label.
Right. And that's the whole thing. Also, whenever someone puts a label on it, whether it's gluten-free or keto, or, I mean, I don't see this as often anymore, but the paleo, brand, or paleo stamping, definitely can have a long list of ingredients, and I would consider processed.
Absolutely. And again, that's where I always feel like that's part of my job, is to help ask the questions that get the person thinking about, well, I've chosen to go this way because I do see the impact on my blood sugar. And maybe, yes, when we look at data together, somebody who's really invested in has chosen to go that route, they're likely looking at their data and seeing the benefit. But then we have to look beyond that, and not just the diabetes effect, but what's the long term? Why are we managing blood sugars the way that we are? It's for long-term health. But if we're adding a 25 list of ingredients, and it's not impacting our blood sugar, what else are those ingredients doing?
Exactly. What's the bigger picture? Yeah.
But yeah. I think too, depending on maybe what age group too that you're kind of looking at, a lower carb or a lower glycemic or a ketogenic type of plan. If you're someone who's younger, there's a little bit more wiggle room in terms of weight management, because metabolically your body is still more
burning through fuel pretty quick.
Correct. So then you might actually just be somebody who can get some quicker weight loss out of it, and along the lines with diabetes, improve insulin sensitivity, right? Other than that, though, if you're older adult, older being, let's say, older than 45 or 50, where metabolic rate really changes after you're about 40.
Absolutely.
Anyway, then we're looking at, you might not see the dramatic results that your 25-year-old, son or daughter or person that you're working with in the office space. Well, goodness, they did this, and look at their dramatic results, and gosh, I'm really sticking to it, and it's not really making that much of a difference to me.
Right. And I think that does, lead to what is sustainable. What can somebody, people always say, what is the best diet? Can I follow a long-term low carb diet? And interestingly, carbohydrates, we naturally feed ourselves or create glucose energy for our bodies. And so there really isn't a set amount of glucose or carbohydrate that I tell people to follow. It's really what is sustainable and what is something that they can stick to and learn the strategies on how to manage their diabetes. And, so I know it's a hot topic for kids to maybe, or for some families who are following a low carb diet for their young children, there is a healthy amount of carbohydrates that kids need just to get their macros, to get their fiber, to get all of the phytochemicals and all of the other nutrients that food provides us. But I don't think there's a limit. And I don't know if that's how you speak to families as well, is that there's not a certain limit of carbohydrates that kids have to have.
Correct. And again, that's where our job is, to provide that background education. It's not a carbohydrate is a carbohydrate is a carbohydrate. If you're choosing to go lower carb from a healthy carbohydrate standpoint, all of the vegetables are a wealth of micronutrients.
Absolutely.
All of those colors and everything that they provide on that micro level, those shouldn't be cut out only in the effort to only eat 20 grams of carb per day. Right. And those that are, I would say, I follow and really pay attention to many of the more keto, true low carb kind of families online. And in general, most of them, if people were following their way of doing things, in general, they try as much as possible to get those vegetables in and have some of the berries and those types of things that are still overall carbs. But because we don't have an amount that's needed of carbohydrate, I think the other picture is how much protein and fat then is needed.
Right.
From a growth perspective on kids, especially, we've been taught eons ago that proteins and fats are more free foods and we don't have to really pay attention unless you started out really long ago, like I did. And there was a certain amount in my standard meal plan that I had to have.
Right. I mean, the exchange program and all of that.
The exchange, yes, thank you. Proteins and 2 fats at every mealtime. But even there was, I think, we've kind of skirted away from the value of the exchange program and the fact that it taught portions.
It did. And it taught true food, right? It wasn't just, have a protein bar and call that a meal. It was actual food.
Right. Absolutely. And then it's the quality of that and knowing how much, gosh, I don't just eat 6 burgers a day because I'm focusing on a low carb diet. How much does your body need for the active level that you're at and the metabolic growth point of life that you're at? Let's make sure that you're meeting your need.
I think whenever we get a chance to talk, we always go back to it's individualized for the person and for where they are in time. And I think, unfortunately, we're getting right back to that with this conversation too.
We are. I mean, and even in the non-keto, but truly low carb, that's where I find a lot more people following, and you mentioned it before, kind of more of the paleo approach. And I think even the paleo in terms of lower carb tends to also get a little bit disjointed in understanding. I mean, there's the paleo in terms of I'm just eating like all of the meat,
right,
and that's all I'm eating, right? Versus more so healthy, lean, quality proteins are a bigger focus at the meal time. But carbohydrates aren't pulled away entirely. Even those diets include things like your vegetables and fruits and low glycemic, grains.
Right.
In some of the paleo types of that's
more of the Mediterranean approach.
Correct. Yeah.
And then I even have a couple of people I'm working with now who are purely carnivore. So it is just animal protein. And I do, hear people subscribing to that a little bit more often now than I had in the past.
Yeah. I'd be curious how many of those people are also using a GLP-1.
It's actually a mix. It's not entirely. Yeah, it is. It is a mix.
And only because obviously we try to encourage, along with the use of a GLP, the better type of protein and making sure that's more of a priority, muscle preservation and build and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I was just kind of curious.
Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, is brought to you by Integrated Diabetes Services, where experience meets expertise, passion meets compassion, and diabetes care is personal because we live it too. Our team of clinicians, all living with type 1 diabetes, understands the challenges firsthand. We're here to help no matter where you are in the world. From glucose management to self-care strategies, the latest tech, sports and exercise, weight loss, type 1 pregnancy, and emotional well-being, we've got you covered. We offer consultations in English and Spanish via phone, video chat, email, and text. Want to learn more? Visit integrateddiabetes.com or email info@integrateddiabetes.com to schedule a consultation.
Because of GLP-1 use being a little bit more widespread in the type 1 community now with the price drops and just different approaches, there is a real push towards increased protein. And I think by definition, if you increase one macro, you are sort of limiting another macro just because you're not as hungry.
Correct. And proteins being, especially animal-based proteins, like the carnivore type of diet, you're not only increasing that protein, but all the natural fat that comes along with that meat. And if you're not careful in going towards more of the lean quality, then absolutely. I mean, your satiety level is very different compared to somebody who's eating more of a mixed diet.
Right. And I guess we didn't really start talking about or really highlight just the benefit of a lower carb diet, the way that we're describing, and not necessarily avoiding carbohydrates just by, they're not evil or something to be avoided.
Correct.
But, does somebody see a benefit in their type 1 management by limiting certainly processed food, certainly processed high sugar food? I always kind of talk about meals, how insulin worthy is that meal? And, is it going to cause a big spike? And high sugar products tend to. And so if you're following a lower glycemic, lower carb diet, are you going to see a benefit? And I
Right.
think some of the studies showed certainly time and range benefit,
Yes.
but not necessarily A1C. And I think we're moving away from A1C as kind of the end all be all metric, but certainly a time and range improvement.
As we should be, honestly. It's
Yep.
really just, as you said, it's just an average, and it doesn't give the
Yes.
day-to-day glycemic variance that can actually contribute more to microvascular
Absolutely.
complications and everything. I also, as I think about how I choose to eat most of the time, as well as when people ask,
Mm-hmm.
there's a report that comes out. I can't remember if it's through the New York Times or whatnot. It's in January. I'm sure you know it. It's all of the diets, quote unquote,
Yeah.
through the course of the year have been evaluated, and which one gets the top hits in terms of
Right.
several different things like cardiovascular, diabetes,
Yes.
and whatever. The Mediterranean diet is always one of the top three. In fact, it's many times the top diet.
Well, it's also the most studied, I think.
It is. And if
Yeah.
you look at it and what it actually encourages, it is not processed. The
Right.
carbohydrates are not simple sugars like powdered mashed potatoes or chips off of a shelf. They're true grains and real vegetables and real fruit. And then you throw into it really lean quality proteins, most of it being seafood, honestly.
Right.
So, transitionally kind of thinking, if you're on the fence, might even be to your advantage to just clean up what's the packaging, see how much lower carb that actually ends up being.
Right. Or again, shopping the perimeter of the grocery store.
Right.
The tried and true is kind of going to the whole food approach, not the store, but the actual what you're putting in your basket.
I know. I always think that grocery stores should actually be a flip flop, right? Most stores, most of the bigger chains today have a natural food section of the grocery store, or where you're going to find the organic and maybe more of the
Sure.
keto products and that kind of stuff. And then the wider part of the grocery store is all the stuff that we really shouldn't be eating most of the time. I always feel like it should be flip flopped, right?
If Jenny was ruling the world, right?
Yes, in Jenny's world. There would be very minimal aisles, and a lot of it would be more perimeter. And then, goodness, if you want this brand name chip off the shelf, you have to go to like the specialty,
the back of the store. Yeah.
Right. And you'd have to call the section something like occasional food or occasional treats or something, so people get the
sometimes food.
That's great. The sometimes area. Yeah.
I guess it does kind of what you're describing is what I talk to people about a lot, is that 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you're going to eat for health, eat for wellness, eat for diabetes management. And then 20% of the time, I went to New York this weekend. I ate my way through that city, right? Did I take into account, the glycemic index? No, I did not. And I was happy not to.
Yeah, I mean, there are always going to be occasions. And, if you truly are the person who can do, I'm the rule follower and I've applied these rules and this is what I'm sticking to, then even on a vacation like that, you find the places and you say, oh, well, the salad is what I'm always going to choose, or the grilled chicken and broccoli is what I'm always going to choose. And I'm not so much caring that, gosh, this is on the menu and I haven't had it in a long time, and I'm absolutely going to have the Italian style sit down pasta bowl, right?
Right. And I think making those accommodations and knowing that it's not scary to eat pizza, from a New York place, late at night, and I enjoyed it. And also remembering that carbs don't have to be completely eliminated. They just, you just need a strategy for how to approach it.
And which obviously starts with insulin. I think insulin is the hallmark of understanding diabetes, sort of the ups and downs. It's understand insulin, how it hits you, how quick it works for you, and then you can tie it into your food and coverage and exercise and adjustment and all of the things.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the more strategies you have, kind of I think it makes it easier with that decision fatigue of like, it's so overwhelming to approach everything you just listed, but taking it back to the basics and learning those strategies is so key.
Right. No, absolutely. There are many different thoughts to low carb, from really big name.
Absolutely.
doctors and, consultants. And I don't expect that a lot of people really know the difference in why they're recommending them for particular population benefit.
Right.
So
yeah, we'll do that next time for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dana. And as always, if there are questions, please look us up, Integrated Diabetes, and step in for more listening. We've always got something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. On behalf of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Shiner, wishing you a fantastic week ahead. And don't forget to think like a pancreas.